Good morning. A bunch of you were there last night. Thank you for coming. And a number of you weren't. So we're going to try to do a little bit of review this morning, but briefly, and then move forward with some new material, new discussion. So today I want to just talk briefly about what we have learned about what the housing challenges and gaps are from what we've been studying over the last year. Review projections of housing needs. I shared those last night. We'll just go over those real quick. And then start to transition to thinking about how do we move forward? What kind of strategy? Some of the things Christopher mentioned, some other ideas. And the big question for a lot of people is, where does the housing actually go if we're going to build new housing? How do we fit it into our community in a positive way? So housing challenges and gaps. Well, just to review a little bit, workforce housing is a big problem for a lot of people, especially in the middle income and lower moderate income range. And they're in the rental market, particularly in competition with students. And students can pay more than they can. That's basically the analysis. So that's real challenging. It creates a lot of problems for those individuals. Particularly at the lower end of the range, it's extremely challenging. So that's a reality we have to acknowledge. This goes on in our community. It's not like everywhere else. Ownership housing. A lot of people that want to come here for employment. We're one of the few places where there's new jobs being created in upstate New York. We're a growing community. Have a hard time finding housing. They want to may own a house somewhere else. They want to move here. It's expensive to build new housing. There's not a lot available in the resale market. We hear from realtors the supply isn't what they need, what they could sell if it was available. So that's an issue. Senior housing. We have a senior population that's going to grow by 44% in the next 10 years. Not all those people want to stay, as Christopher mentioned, in their houses. They like alternatives. There aren't many, quite frankly, right now. And for people that don't have high incomes, we have, in many cases, nothing to offer. There's no Medicaid assisted living available in this community. If people need that, they have to leave. Market rate rentals were mentioned by people that work with seniors that would like to transition to a simpler, easier to deal with housing situation. Their options are extremely limited. Nothing there that really meets their needs. Downsizing options in general. We don't offer a lot. It could be an opportunity. And then special needs housing. We spent some time, our consultants did, also talking with the folks that deal with those people in our community that are struggling one way or another. And there's been a lot of efforts to provide housing for those folks in the community, but almost every place that provides it has waiting lists for people to get in. And some of these options don't exist at all. And so we really need to be cognizant of that, not just the broad market, but there's some very specific needs in our community that we need to be aware of and try to address. What's going to drive housing demand over the next 10 years? Employment growth. We're anticipating 1% per year employment growth. That's been the trend. Other than the dip with the recession, we felt a little bit, not as much as some places, but we did. But other than that, that's the trend. And we're, like I said, one of the few places that's creating new jobs in upstate New York. We want to continue to be able to do that, but you have to have housing. We don't want to just have everybody driving in. Student enrollment increases. In our analysis, we assumed about a 1% growth. That's a real question mark. The institutions haven't said they have a target, but that's kind of a trend line over time. They would benefit in some cases, Cornell, Ithaca College, TC3, from more students, but we need to be able to accommodate them if we're going to have them come here. The growth in the senior population I mentioned, that's huge. And again, it's a double-edged sword. It's an opportunity as well as a challenge. If there's other places for these folks to move, it may help open up housing for the families that need it. And as Christopher mentioned, preference for walkable communities and access to transportation options. A lot of the places that people have to go to find housing don't offer either of those things right now. And so there's high demand in the community for places for housing that offers those. Specific gaps. Again, of the workforce rental housing, especially we heard from people, if somebody can find a place they can afford to rent, they can't find a way to get from there to where they get work. And they can't find to get from there to where they work at the times they have to be there. So that's a real challenge for those folks that are trying to get stabilized in the community with employment and income and all of those things, and yet things are working against them rather than with them. First-time home buyers, people that are trying to move up from rentals into ownership housing. First of all, they're paying so much for rent that it's hard to save enough money for a down payment. And then when they are ready, the options that they can afford are so limited. And often if they can afford to get into it, they can't afford to live in it because it needs so much fixing up, repair, and improvement. Families relocating to the community, as I mentioned, we've heard from many employers that have offered jobs, good paying jobs, to people who said, yes, I'd love to come to Ithaca. They come and look at the housing situation, they say, no, thank you. I think I'll stay where I am or go somewhere else. That's a huge problem for our economy if that's happening, that we can't get the talent we need to fill the jobs that we need to keep our economy healthy. Downsizing households, as I mentioned, we really could use better options for folks and seniors. Purpose-built student housing, the consultant identified an opportunity to provide more purpose-built student housing in the community, which there would be a demand for. If you look at the surveys that have been of students, both in a survey was done by us and by Cornell, they would like some other options than what they have right now. And so that could also free up other housing for workforce housing. And then the special needs populations I mentioned. There's particularly, I'd like to just mention, as I did last night, the youth that aren't in college in our community. They're struggling to get on their own, working minimum wage jobs if they have a job. And for them to find housing is extremely difficult when they're competing with students whose parents are paying the bill, and these kids don't have a parent paying the bill for them. So what do we think we need? As I mentioned last night, these are early kind of estimates, but this could be what we need over the next 10 years, something in this range. Rental housing, 200 units a year. Ownership housing between single-family condos, whatever, townhomes, could be up to 380. But those units need to be affordable to the people that, with incomes to be able to purchase them. So that's a real challenge. We could sell those if we could provide them at the right price range. Senior population, in addition to the focus of downsizing, those special needs for assisted living or nursing home care or memory care, we estimate with the growth of the population, we're going to need 50 to 100 beds in those kinds of facilities per year over 10 years to meet the need. Student beds, anywhere from 150 to meet the need that just current student populations could support, to 330 beds a year over 10 years if the student population increases. And then all those special needs, specific facilities targeted towards those populations that have very specific needs.
Is there a number for that last one?
We don't have a number for each of those. We do have some data from the providers now about how many people are waiting for that facility that may exist in the community now. We know that there are studies that have been done on some of these that, the Amici house that's being proposed is trying to address one of these populations. So there are people looking at that, but we don't have a composite number. It would be included within the bigger numbers for the population, but it would be a subset.
Are you taking into consideration that the nation's looking at deinstitutionalizing people and doing more community-based services versus...
I think if you could hold the questions, I will definitely get to that.
I was just
because
going to say, please do that.
Yes, but I'm not saying they have to be in institutionalized situations, but they have to be in situations people can afford and be successful in. So if you look at it, it's kind of evenly divided between housing that would be in single-family or attached units and housing that you'd expect to be in multifamily units, the rental in condos. So what are some strategies? Initial thoughts, just some things we've heard from a lot of people in the community over and over again. Why does it cost so much to build new housing? Is there anything we can do about it? We hear about labor costs being very high, land costs being very high, the development review process imposing costs that are very high. Not sure which of those we can control, but we need to look closely at that and see if there's any of them that we can, or we can provide ways to underwrite some of those costs. Neighborhood opposition. We've had several projects in this community that developers spent a lot of time on, and they didn't succeed. They failed, they didn't get approved, they didn't go forward, largely because of neighborhood opposition. I'm not putting the blame on anyone here. It could be that there's people who are resistant and maybe need to open their minds a little bit. It also could be the communities haven't done the planning they need to do to make sure things fit in. So there's work to be done there. Insufficient state and federal funding support. We've tapped out tax credits pretty well in this community. The competition in the state is huge for tax credit projects. We've done pretty well. There's just, federal government and state government have kind of stepped away from their responsibility in many ways for especially the lower income, and that's a huge challenge. But those people that do get assistance, rental assistance, a lot of the landlords in this community won't accept it. So their options are narrowed right from the start. And that's part of the competition with students. There's people that have housing vouchers that they can't get into housing. Property taxes have been mentioned, especially school taxes, as being really high and driving the increases in rents. Something we got to acknowledge and think about. Competition from students, as I mentioned, providing better student options may help. Access to development sites. We've heard from developers, people want to have good locations, walkable, on a transit route. They can't find the land. Maybe there's a solution to that if we look a little harder. And then with the condominium market, there's a lot of interest in that from people that want to downsize. Very hard to develop condominiums because of all the rules and regulations and financing requirements. Can we take that challenge head on and do something about it? So how do we provide the housing and where? Well, we don't have to do sprawl. We can do infill. Christopher mentioned several strategies for that. We can do new neighborhoods in targeted locations that make sense. And luckily we have some planning that has identified those. Create a variety of options. Fill the gaps. Don't just build more of the same. Look at those places where there's money to invest in new housing. Like I said, seniors that want to downsize, for example, student purpose-built housing. And if we provide that, that opens up other housing for those folks that need it. Build what the market will support. It's kind of what I just said. And continue to focus on low to moderate income housing, because that's where the challenge really is. Make sure we don't take our eye off the ball on that while we see projects going up that may serve other segments of our community. We really need to be concerned with the people that struggle the most. So finally, where could the housing go? Well, we're in the process of completing an infill analysis for the whole county about where, in places that we've identified in our county comprehensive plan as development focus areas, and that most local comprehensive plans have identified as areas where they would like to see development, where there is land available that could be developed for housing based on current zoning and plans. And we have found that in these areas, as well as adding suburban Lansing, southern Lansing, where the town of Lansing's plans talking about more housing, we could provide, it looks like at first blush, more than twice as many units as I said we need. So it's not like there aren't places to do this. And you might say, well, that's all hypothetical, sounds great. But you can really pinpoint it. So in the urban core, which is kind of the city of Ithaca, parts of the town of Ithaca, village of Lansing, village of Cayuga Heights, there's room for easily for 3,500 more units and the student beds we need to add. And established and emerging nodes, which is really the villages primarily, a couple other locations that have been identified in comprehensive plans that have infrastructure, 500 more units. In the rural centers, the hamlets scattered all around the county that are the centers of many of our rural towns, we could put 300 units pretty easily. And in suburban Lansing, they believe that 1,500 would be not a challenge, that they have plans for more than that even possible. So that there would do what we think we might need. And what it looked like? Well, we've seen some examples, and we've got some in process. So this is not rocket science necessarily. Breckenridge Place. Everybody loves Breckenridge Place. We could do some more of those, hopefully. City center. Not everybody loves this one quite as much, but it's getting there, and we need some, we need a mix of things. So there may be opportunities to do some sort of large, dense projects that provide a lot of units. Breckenridge Place 50, I think we're talking, 190 maybe here now?
98.
Okay. But those make a real dent, so we can't overlook the opportunities they provide. But there's also the infill, things that INHS has done, putting a duplex in on a vacant lot. The pocket neighborhood on Aurora Street. We can tuck in housing that all of a sudden, after a little while, it looks like it's been there all along or needs to be, it belongs there. But not just in the city. Village of Dryden, Poets Landing, almost, I think it's going to be 120 some units of affordable rental housing on a good location, near schools, not far from the downtown, walkable to downtown and to transit. And also single-family housing in the villages. We've got Maple Ridge right across from the town hall in the village, where single-family homes are being built. So there's lots of places that we can do this. It doesn't all just have to be in the city. And not everybody wants to live there either. Varna, several projects proposed there. One that's gotten good reception is this infill of tiny timbers, 15 little small houses on small lots that may be more affordable for folks that are trying to get a first house to buy. Or that want to downsize a little bit. 210 Hancock, INHS's great project, a mix of apartments and townhomes, infill projects that utilizing an underutilized site. We've got to look for other opportunities like that. 50-some units there, I believe. Maplewood, we've talked about with student housing for graduate students, densifying in a way that's going to be very attractive, positive for the community, adding 500 student beds in the process, in a very attractive kind of community that I think is getting acceptance by the neighborhood as it goes forward. Chainworks, the big one, reuse of the Emerson, that's just sitting there doing nothing. If we can figure out a way to make sure that project happens, that's 900 plus new residences right near downtown, right near the Ithaca College campus. You couldn't ask for a better opportunity. And the city waterfront. Everybody wants to see the waterfront thrive. Well, these two projects, redevelopment of the DOT site we've been working on, the Cascadilla Landing project that was approved but hasn't been developed yet. Together, there's 300 units plus of housing in the city in a walkable location. In the town of Ithaca on South Hill, there's town plan calls for a new neighborhood just south of Ithaca College. Great location for people that might be working there or on the new business campuses on South Hill. 300 plus units could be developed in a walkable community with good transit service to downtown and other locations, services available on site, not just for the people in the new neighborhood, but for the people surrounding that live there now. So there's lots of ways we can do this. And we just got to make sure the things that are proposed can happen in the best way possible, in the most economical way possible. We need to come up with a strategy to identify ways to overcome the challenges we know that exist, focus on how to do it, new development, the most cost-effective ways to keep it as affordable as possible, and keep it in accordance with local plans so that hopefully it'll be accepted in the community. And we recognize that this change is not without some consequences for people, and not something that won't make some people a little bit nervous, particularly existing landlords have expressed concern, seeing some upticks in vacancy rates. We need to keep on track of what's really going on out there. So we're proposing that we annually do a monitoring of rents and vacancy rates, not just looking at the national statistics, which have a lot of error in them, the way they're done, but do a local vacancy study in rental study so we can make sure we understand what's going on. For more information, again, as last night on our county website, we have a lot of the housing studies, the detailed data for people to take a look at, and the website for this summit will have information going forward as to where we go next. And we'll have questions in a little while. Thank you.